It's now time to begin our debate for the 33rd District State Senate seat. We will begin with Mr. Linares for his opening statement.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Art Linares, your state senator. I'd like to thank Clinton High School and the Clinton High School students for giving us the opportunity to have an exchange of ideas here tonight. I always like speaking to students, especially here in this town where I've spent a good part of my life. My political career actually started when I ran for class president in middle school, and the bug never left me after that. That is why I want you to know that it's important that you never let anyone tell you that you're too young to start building your dreams. Don't seek equal outcomes, seek equal opportunities, because the harder you work in life, the more successful you will become. Education is important, not just because of what you learn, but because it challenges you to do better. And our communities need your generation and our generation to be the next great American generation, to be the next workers, homeowners, and entrepreneurs in Connecticut. Some of you might decide to go to college. Some may become self-employed. One of you might become the next Mark Zuckerberg. Whatever you do, the most important thing is that you work hard and you to achieve your dreams. Now, I'm here tonight to talk about some concerns that my constituency has and my ideas to solve them. The ideas that I want to stand for in the state Senate for the next 2 years. We have a big issue in the state when it comes to jobs. We need to be more competitive economically so that the next generation could have careers, live here, and own a home here and retire here. We need to do a better job of making sure that our government doesn't continue to spend money in a wasteful manner, and that we can balance our budget without raising taxes and work to lower the tax burden on our hardworking families and senior citizens. We need to continue to invest in education and our infrastructure, which are the fundamental roles and fundamental role of our government. And it's an honor to be your state senator, and I look forward to a constructive debate tonight, talking about ideas to improve all of your lives. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move on to Emil Bjornberg for her opening statement.
Thank you very much. My name is Emil Bjornberg, and I am the Democratic nominee for the 33rd State Senate District. I wanted to start tonight by saying that I know this hasn't been an easy day for Clinton. I want to offer my condolences from the very bottom of my heart. I know you all had a very tough day. And I think that Gary Bear is a big reminder, actually, to all of us, at the end of the day, that we have to be able to work together on the things that we care about the most, on the issues that matter most to us. So whatever happens in the next 2 weeks, we stand firm by each other in community about the things that matter most. But as I said, my name is Emil Bjornberg, and I come from a family that's run the same small business in the same location on the side of Hamburg Cove and Lime for 7 generations. My parents, who are over there in the audience, were high school sweethearts at the Old Lyme High School. And after I graduated from that same high school, I fell in love with a boy from Old Saybrook, whose father grew up in Clinton before finding the girl of his dreams in Haddam. Our story mirrors the story of so many families inside the 33rd State Senate District. I grew up surrounded by the beauty and the folklore of the Connecticut River, and I can remember begging my grandfather, Leland Reynolds, to tell me tales of his childhood, of winters that were so cold that he would get into his Ford and literally drive across the Connecticut River from Hamburg Cove to Essex to fill up with gasoline. And I'd ask him to tell me all kinds of stories of sort of the one-room schoolhouses and all the folklore that goes around it. The beauty of the lower Connecticut River Valley, the rolling hills, the undeveloped basin, the clean water, and the diverse wildlife, these have been sources of pride for all of us for generations. And I'm proud to echo the sentiments of my great-grandfather, who used to tell people that the Connecticut River flowed through his veins. Today, my husband Jason and I live in Hadline with our 2 children who attend public school systems, and I'm proud to see many of their teachers in the audience tonight. Jason is an Iraq War veteran, and while he served in uniform overseas, I took a job running an AIDS clinic in downtown Johannesburg, South Africa. I currently work on issues of social justice with the youth and families of the Deep River Congregational Church. But as I said, I stand before you tonight because my story is the story of so many people who already live here. We are a people who believe above all else in community, and Gary Bear was a perfect example of that. We know we have to stand by one another in tough times, and we have to fight to preserve what we've built up here over many generations. Just like many of you guys, I'm heavily invested in my community, and I volunteer with a lot of different organizations. And I'm proud to say that my family comes from a long line of service in the fire department, on town boards and committees, and actually in both political parties. Truth be told, my father still sits today on the Republican Town Committee inside the town of Lyme. We have long been a family who puts everything into service, and I look forward, thank you, to the seat.
It's a little warm up here, so I'm going to loosen the tie. I mean, we're in this together. So I see my parents out there too. That's always cute. Hi, Mom. But regardless, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to you folks. It's definitely an honor to be up here. My name is Colin Bennett, and I believe that I can earn your vote. And my opponents believe they can buy it. Now, considering my conservative opponent has refused to participate in any debates in the northern section of our district, which in fact has the largest town, Colchester, this is likely to be our last debate. As such, I'm going to change tactics a little bit. While I'm prepared to answer questions that are posed tonight, what I'm really going to talk about is the big picture. We can argue all night long about taxes and about he said, she said, Republican, conservative, partisan politics, but I'm going to talk about root causes. But before I do that, I want to tell you a very brief story. On my way here, I stopped at a local business, Simon's in Chester actually, to have a soft drink and prepare my notes. It's a pre-debate ritual, as Emily knows. Well, today, I ran into a woman by the name of Paula. Paula went on and on about how angry she is with the two-party system. I told her I completely agree, it's nuts, it doesn't work. But then Paula told me that since she thinks the system is so broken, she's not going to vote in this election. You know what? Politics me off. There's my joke for you. Seriously though, we face so many problems that I often doubt that we'll actually be able to solve them. Really, like there's so many problems. By almost every indicator out there, things are getting worse. But even though I'm not convinced that we will make things better, I am 100% certain that we can. In fact, the solutions to almost all of our problems are simple. The question is, are we going to stick with the status quo that got us into this situation in the first place, or are we going to take the necessary steps and elect candidates like me that can bring us forward to solutions? You know, we have Democrats on one side, Republicans on the left, arguing all the time, playing tug of war with our country, with our state, with our district. I'm a candidate that can bring us forward. Right now, I'm going to try to channel Leslie Knope. I love Connecticut. I was born here, and I was raised here. Like the person earlier, Jesse, said, a lot of my friends have long since left. I chose to stay. I live paycheck to paycheck. I struggle it out because I love it here so much. And I want to continue living here regardless of how much of a struggle. But I'm going to fight. I've dedicated my whole life, my whole adult life, to helping others, and I'm going to continue that fight regardless of this election. But the thing is, I am the best candidate in this race. We're lucky. We're all lucky that we have three choices. But the fact of the matter is, we're in this together. And I'm the person that wants to help you. I want to help us make Connecticut the best state in the country. So again, my name is Colin Bennett. As you can see, hashtag Bennett for Senate. And on November 4th, I'm asking you to vote for me.
Thank you. We will now move on to Emil Bjornberg for our first question.
In a recent Gallup poll, 49% of Connecticut residents expressed a desire to leave the state, many of whom are recent college graduates. What do you attribute to these numbers to, and what might you do to change the exodus?
It's a really great question, and I appreciate it. I think that oftentimes when we discuss our economy, we're having the wrong conversation. We often look at ways to augment support for giant corporations, and we throw money at big corporations to move here from outside. And I don't think that that's realistic, nor do I think that it makes our small towns any stronger than they already are. And what I'm after in the Senate is trying to make sure that we advocate for the real drivers of our economy, making sure that we actually put our small towns in particular on sustainable footing. And the truth of the matter is that it's not giant corporations that drive our economy, it's small business. And so what we need to do is create an environment that really encourages new, innovative small businesses to grow organically with the people that already live here. You know, I come from a family that's run a business for a very long time on the side of Hamburg Cove, and all of them would tell you that they don't feel like they have a voice up in Hartford. They don't feel represented very well, they don't feel as if they are heard or that they have a respected voice at the table. And that's the part that has to change. You know, we need somebody to really be able to untangle the burdensome regulations that really choke out growth in our small business. And then also ease property tax burdens. Oftentimes when you see the state government try to pare things back in an irresponsible or unsustainable manner, really what they're doing is just shuffling burden onto the municipalities. And there are a lot of examples that I could give you of that, including, quite frankly, the state of New Jersey, where the municipalities can at this point barely keep their head above water in terms of just trying to keep basic services going. I think that we need a state government that really understands exactly where the rubber hits the road inside of our small towns and responsibly advocates tirelessly for stuff that will make us stronger.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett, you will be next in the rotation.
You can call me Colin, it's totally. First of all, I want to start out, how many people in this room don't already know who they're going to vote for? All right, so let's have a conversation, all three of you. So, as a young person myself, relatively young, as, like I said, a person that is from Connecticut, raised in Connecticut, went to school in Connecticut, Westbrook, went to Southern, graduated. I left the state for a couple of years to work, but I was commuting back and forth. I actually went all the way down to Northern Virginia, right outside of DC. And although I was working there, I still lived in Westbrook. I was commuting back and forth down to Virginia every weekend, every week, and then every weekend back to Connecticut, just about every weekend. For almost 3 years I was doing that because I saw a great opportunity in Virginia to go down there, make a little bit of money, and then try to come back and maybe buy a house and do those things. It didn't quite work out like that. But the fact of the matter is, in order to keep young people in Connecticut, I think that we do have to create jobs. There's a lot of ways to do that. Like I said, a lot of the solutions that we have to all of our problems are really, really simple. The fact of the matter is, we have to think about priorities. So, if you think about all of the money that's being spent in the world, in Connecticut, in this district, at any given minute, it's astronomical. There's money flowing all over the place. But so much, the vast majority, I'd argue, of that money is going to the wrong places. We're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on things like incarceration in Connecticut. In fact, billions of dollars in incarceration in Connecticut for nonviolent drug offenders, which just doesn't make sense. So I think that if we implement solutions, holistic solutions, where we look at problems holistically and interconnectedly, because everything is connected, that we can start to come up with solutions. For example, I 100% that making public university tuition in Connecticut, in fact this country, is not only a completely feasible goal, it makes a lot of sense, because we already spend more money subsidizing colleges through federal loans and a whole bunch of other different problems than it would cost to put every single kid that currently goes to college for free. So if we reprioritize the money that we're already spending on the things that they should be spending on, then I think we'd be in good shape. And furthermore, just last thing, we need to make Connecticut cool again. You know, Connecticut's a land of quite frankly, it's like mostly rich old white people. At least that's the perception that we get from any time you go outside Connecticut. go out to Connecticut, they're like, oh, you're from Connecticut. A, you must be rich. Well, obviously you're white. But the point is, like, yeah, that's the perception that we have. And people going through school right now, they see it that way too, so many of them. They're like, oh, I want to go somewhere much cooler. So let's work on that too.
Thank you. Mr. Linares?
It's an unfortunate poll. It's unfortunate to hear that 49% of the people in Connecticut would live somewhere else if they could. And I think we need to focus on who are these people that are looking to leave and why. And so that's what I've done in this campaign. I've spoken to these people and talked about solutions to their problems. I've lived here almost my whole life with a wonderful family, and my sister and her family, and they just had a child, and we'd like to continue to live here in Connecticut together. It's a wonderful place, and we couldn't imagine living anywhere else. And when I think about the people who are looking to leave, these are the issues that I think about. First, we have seniors. Seniors are having a hard time living in Connecticut because we're one of the only states in the country that taxes pensions. And that's why it's the third hardest state in the country to retire. We need to phase out the pension tax for senior citizens. Let them hold on to a little bit more money on their fixed income so they can afford to live here. Also, hardworking families. After the recent tax increase on our middle class, one of the largest tax increases in our state history, and we still have a deficit of $2.8 billion. Hardworking families are very concerned that there's going to be another tax increase on them, and they can't take it anymore. People are worn out by the taxes. We need to balance our budget. We need to do so in a responsible way. And the other problem is young people. Young people are going to our world-class universities and then heading off to other states. We need to keep them here. That's why I proposed a bill called the Learn Here, Live Here program, which encourages young people to start businesses in this state. Let's make sure that the next young entrepreneurs start their next big idea in Connecticut. And we do this by improving our attitude towards the people that we represent in Hartford. Too often, people in Connecticut feel like they work for government and not the other way around. And I will be their voice in Hartford, and I will make sure that I work tirelessly so that 100% of the people in Connecticut want to live here, want to be here, want to retire here.
Thank you. Our next question will be for you.
Is it the last question or is it the rebuttal?
Oh, I apologize.
No.
I apologize. The rebuttal will go to you. I apologize.
Thanks. I am glad that Art brought up working families because I do think that they feel particularly vulnerable in our current economy. And I was very proud to accept the endorsement of the Working Families Party in this campaign. And part of the reason why they endorsed my candidacy is because the biggest issue that they worked to help to pass in this last session was minimum wage. If you are a working family and you are working day and night to pay bills, to have a sitting senator that votes against the most vulnerable among us is a problem. I have worked all over the world with very vulnerable people, and I'm telling you right now that societies do best when they make sure that they augment the strength of the working poor and the middle class. And you have to have sitting leaders that understand that. I think the cost of living is very high in Connecticut, but my family has been here for 7 generations. This is not the first tough thing we faced, and it's not even the toughest time that we've ever faced. All of us know this. Our household budgets have had to be tightened, and we've got to be able to learn to live within our means. But we also need to make sure that we're funneling money into education, and we're working on property tax reform, and that we're keeping energy costs low. And the other thing that we can begin to do is widen our tax base, again, with an environment that's conducive to actually beginning to grow jobs here, with the people who already live here by having an environment that increases the likelihood of new small business startups.
Thank you, Emily. Colin?
So, I understand the purposes of rebuttals, but then it gets kind of tedious after a while, don't you think? It's like, oh, back and forth, back and forth. So I'm going to use my time to talk about something else that almost never gets talked about in these debates. In fact, it almost never comes up except in certain circles, and that's racial justice and the lack of it in this society. And I understand that looking around the room, some of this might fall on deaf ears. But I read recently that there are being more young black men being killed by police officers in this country currently than there were during the height of Jim Crow being killed by the KKK or everybody put together. That's a national travesty. It's not something that we talk about. Things like that happen right here in Connecticut. Maybe not so much this district, but in places like Hartford, Bridgeport, Waterbury, any urban area in Connecticut. Furthermore, we have so many people in prison. The prison population in Connecticut has risen from 3,800 people 30 years ago to 16,500. It's like, oh, who cares? Regardless if you care about a whole bunch of criminals in prison, if that's your point of view, we spend a ton, ridiculous amounts of money on that. I learned one staggering fact recently. 1 in 8 of all state employees works for the Department of Corrections. 1 in 8 of all state employees works for the Department of Corrections. Furthermore, does anybody know how much we spend per prisoner per year? About $34,000 per prisoner per year. Does anybody know how much we spend per student per year in this state, per K through 12? Half of that. This is what I'm talking about, priorities. Let's get our priorities straight. Taxes are one thing, and I agree that we need to stabilize taxes. And I'm not going to use like the politically not correct, but the one that's tested, like the working poor. Let's help poor people, regardless if they're working or not. Like that's just the way it works. Poor people need help. Middle class people need help.
Thank you. Mr. Linares.
Thank you. I would like to just comment on what my opponent had accused me of. First of all, I was endorsed by the Connecticut Business and Industry Association because I have a record of supporting job growth policies in the Senate, and I'll continue to do that in the next legislative session. And as I said on the floor of the Senate, I would have voted for the minimum wage if they included a very important piece. And that was to make sure that young people didn't lose their jobs because of the minimum wage increase. Young people coming home from college who are trying to get a job in the summertime, working for a local marina, working for a local restaurant, whose owners might not be able to afford to give them the minimum wage increase. And unfortunately, a lot of young people will lose their jobs because of the minimum wage that was passed. And I stood on the Senate floor and offered an amendment and said that I would vote for the bill if they would make sure that young people didn't lose their jobs when we passed the bill, and they turned it down. The Democratic majority turned it down. That's very unfortunate, and I think it's unfortunate for the young people in here because a job is better than no job.
Connecticut is one of 43 states that have adopted the common standards in its related Common Core testing program. In addition, Connecticut has adopted a mandatory teacher evaluation program in which 22.5% of a teacher's evaluation is based on the results their students get on the standardized tests. 1, do you support Common Core? Why or why not? And second, do you support Connecticut's teacher evaluation law? Why or why not?
It's a very important question. As a member of the Education Committee, Common Core was adopted prior to me entering the the legislature. So in the legislature, much of the issues that we had to discuss on the Education Committee was Common Core, was teacher evaluation, and was SBAC testing. Let's start with Common Core. The issue with Common Core is that it's a top-down approach. It's an umbrella approach for every school system, expecting them all to have the same issues, same concerns. That's not the way our local boards of educations operate. So we had a big issue there, and I fought to make sure that we gave more flexibility for parents, teachers, and students when we had that discussion about Common Core. And the same goes to teacher evaluation. There was a tremendous amount of pressure on our local school systems. In fact, the very first meeting that I was asked to attend after I was elected your state senator was with the Clinton Board of Education and your first selectman to talk about the teacher evaluation, to talk about SBAC testing, to talk about all the red tape that was placed on your school system and how it was affecting the way teachers can tailor education to your needs. And I worked tirelessly to give them the flexibility they needed to be able to give you the best education possible, and we got it done.
Thank you. Emily?
It is a really good question. It's a very important question, and as the mother of 2 small children in our public school system, I think this is an issue that we need to make sure we get right. I wanted to start also by saying that this gives me the opportunity to let everyone know that I've been endorsed by the CEA and the AFT and the Congress of Connecticut Community Colleges and the Connecticut State University American Association of University Professors, which is really the 4 major unions that pull in all educators from preschool through postgraduate in the state of Connecticut. And the reason why is because, you know, Art sits on the Education Committee, he's right, but our teachers have never felt more demonized than they feel today. And that's a problem, a huge problem. My little boy, Elliot, who is in 3rd grade this year, who started with Mrs. Lupone in kindergarten, who's right back there in the audience, he's got the same 3rd grade teacher this year that I did. Connie Price. She's a phenomenal educator. And she's not just a phenomenal educator, she's also a stand-up member of our community, across the board. And so that's why I feel it is deeply sad to me that we have teachers who feel like they are the subject of distrust. Because at the end of the day, if we have educators that are standing in front of our kids that don't feel respected, then it's our kids that suffer. It's the classroom that suffers. And in the whole implementation of Common Core, I do think that Common Core is a good idea, but it was problematic in the way that it was implemented with the student testing and teacher evaluation. And let me be the first to say, as a mom, I couldn't possibly care any less what my child gets on a standardized test. But the sad thing for me was that it was not only the voice of teachers that got lost out of that room, it was also the voice of parents. And parents have more skin in this game than anybody else. And they know better than to make our teachers feel demonized. We've got to hold those guys up, and we have to work together in a positive way, constructively, to make sure that as we roll those things out and as we implement them, we are doing it in a way that says to our children constantly, you are that important to us. That we're not going to divide anybody based on fear. We're not going to shut any voices out of the room. We're going to make sure everybody nails it on this one. Because if we don't stand up for our children, I don't know what we stand for.
On one hand, I fundamentally, to the core of my being, understand how important, how absolutely integral education is to the development of everything. Like, it's the very rock, the very foundation of everything. On the other hand, I also understand a little bit about the history of education in this country and how, when our federal government originally instituted compulsory education, there were literally riots around the country. Parents were like, what do you mean? You've got to be kidding me. You're not stealing my kid away in their most formative years and then indoctrinating them in whatever you think is the best. Riots around the country. Eventually, obviously, the federal government won, and now every kid has to go to school from 18 to 6, I mean from 5 years old to 16 years old, learning God knows what. I am also a parent, and again, I understand the absolute imperative of education, but I also think that education should be put mostly, if not entirely, in the hands of parents. Now, we also need balances, because we could have a town, I mean, quite frankly, that gets taken over by a bunch of, like, the Board of Education gets taken over by a bunch of nut jobs, and then they think that they're going to put in, like, God knows what creationism and everything else that is literally not true at all. And then you have all the other kids in that school district that are forced to learn them. So obviously we need checks and balances. The question is, how do we do that? And I don't think that Common Core is the right way to do that. I think that we need to put the majority of the control of our children's education, like I said, back into the hands of parents and local school boards. But I think that that needs to be done with some checks and balances through both, primarily the state and maybe a little bit of federal oversight.
Thank you. We now move back to Mr. Linares for his rebuttal.
There's no rebuttal. We went over the issue. I don't think that is there a point to rebuttal when we haven't been challenged? So I think I'll be okay.
All right, sure. Next question. This will go to Colin.
What specifically could you do as a state senator to help bring more jobs to Connecticut?
I think as a priority of my campaign, I talk a lot about ramping up the state's clean energy economy. And that's actually kind of my way of framing that the biggest challenge we face as, individuals, as a state, as a planet, is the climate crisis. We can address the climate crisis by creating jobs in Connecticut. That's people who are both working in manufacturing and installing of renewable energy technologies, but also developing new technologies that will help us address said climate crisis. In some towns, in fact, across the state, during Governor Malloy's current term in office, they've been tricked into investing in so-called natural gas. Natural gas is a toxic, nasty thing that is a fossil fuel that is, by definition, going to run out. So the government, our state government, is tricking people into investing in this so-called natural gas. It's actually methane, again, this toxic, noxious gas that is poisonous and all kinds of other things. Thereby wasting hundreds of millions of dollars. It doesn't make sense. It's it's figuratively a huge step in the wrong direction. The point is, we need to be investing gung-ho 100%, no breaks whatsoever in a renewable energy economy. Not only will that create countless jobs in Connecticut, it'll also keep our air clean, it'll keep our water clean, and it'll keep carbon dioxide emissions out of the atmosphere. And I'm thinking that my colleague here to my right, your left, will probably agree because he's in the solar business. But the point is, I think that that would be a priority. Two other things that I'll mention briefly is I think that Connecticut, like I said, I love Connecticut. It's a truly wonderful, beautiful place. We 100% need to encourage investment at the state level in our tourism economy. Tourism brings in $9 billion to our economy, but that's just a little bit of what our potential is. It also has currently 110,000 jobs in our economy in Connecticut. I think that it could bring in much more than that. And then furthermore, agriculture, supporting small local farms, specifically organic farms, are three just simple ways that we can create jobs in Connecticut.
Thank you. We now move on to Mr. Linares.
Thank you. It's a very important question. How do we create jobs in Connecticut? And I think the first most important thing we need to understand is that it's business owners, it's entrepreneurs, it's hardworking people that create jobs. And the first thing we need to do is be more competitive as a state. Right now, our sales tax, our gasoline tax, income tax, property tax, fees and penalties for all these other taxes are much more higher than our neighboring states. We can't compete when our tax code is higher than Massachusetts or New Hampshire. And when you go down to South Carolina, it's a much more attractive regulatory and tax code environment. So we need to work on lowering our tax codes so that we don't lose businesses to our neighbors. That's very important, and that's what I will fight for in Hartford. We also need to get rid of the uncertainty that our workforce faces and that our business owners face. Right now in Connecticut, we have a $2.8 billion deficit. We have $68 billion of unfunded liabilities. The teacher pension went from being $6 billion underfunded to $11 billion underfunded. And underfunded liabilities are just taxes down the road waiting to happen. Until we can get our fiscal house in order, it's going to be very difficult to keep our workforce here when they know that they can put more money in their pocket working somewhere else. It's also going to be difficult to keep entrepreneurs here when they know they can start a business in a friendlier environment. We need to change that, get rid of the uncertainty by balancing our budget without increasing the burden on hardworking people and making sure that businesses can start here. We need to improve our infrastructure. Right now, we have the 49th worst infrastructure in the country. Part of that has to do with the fact that for years, the money going into the special transportation fund from the gasoline tax has been squandered into the general fund. One of the things that I worked on was making sure that we have a lockbox on the special transportation fund so that the DOT can predict how much money they have to rebuild our roads and bridges. And instead of working on a busway from New Britain to Hartford, DOT employees should be focusing on making sure that our roads and bridges are adequate, because that's a responsibility of government. Ultimately, we need to improve our attitude towards businesses, cut the red tape, making sure that we have an environment here that is conducive to growth organically so that jobs can grow, entrepreneurs can create jobs here, and we can be successful, have a confident Connecticut economy. Thank you.
I said from the very beginning that I think that where the bulk of sort of economic growth can come from around here, that will be effective where the rubber hits the road, is by augmenting support for small business. And that's really sort of twofold. Number one, we certainly need to have lower taxes, but that's kind of the end game, right? It should be a little bit of a red flag too when a politician stands up 2 weeks before the election and says, I'm going to lower your taxes, but they don't really tell you where they're going to cut spending, because otherwise if we cut taxes without cutting spending, all we're doing is shuffling the difference onto our children, and I do think that's problematic. But we also need to make sure that we actually are tailoring regulations with small businesses in mind instead of huge corporations in mind. Small businesses really don't feel like they have a voice at the table, and there's a reason for that. Small businesses don't send teams of lawyers and lobbyists up to the Capitol to make sure that legislators are tailoring the mandates appropriately. So they don't feel like they are respected, and that part really does have to change. That's what I mean when I say that we need to create a climate where innovative small businesses really feel confident setting down their roots and growing right here. The truth is that Connecticut does not and will not have natural resources like oil and coal that we can continue to just drill down into the earth and pull value out. Our value is in human capital. And it has been for a while, so we have to be able to double down on that one. We need to keep the edge that we have by funding the infrastructure we have and the education system that we have. But I actually think we sit right now in a very exciting place, particularly inside the 33rd State Senate District. There's a lot of people who don't know that we have $11.5 billion every year in the state of Connecticut that is created by the tourism industry, and 70% of it, let me say that again, 70% of that $11.5 billion comes along the I-95 corridor. We're sitting right there. We need to look at exactly how we market our tourism industry around here so that we support it and make sure that it is growing effectively, and I will continue there in the rebuttal.
So, Emily, I guess it starting to sound a lot like me in some of these questions, so I guess I'm having an effect up here after all. I do want to say about something that was said earlier, and that's this idea of a minimum wage. And sometimes I'm literally nauseated by this idea of a minimum wage. A company can say, all right, I'm going to pay you, I would pay you nothing. I would pay you pennies if I could, but the government's going to force me to pay you this much. It doesn't make sense. This is not the way our society, this is not the way that we should live on this planet, where we're literally paying the bare minimum. You know, Art said, a job is better than no job. What about 2 or 3 or 4 jobs just to survive? That's not okay. Literally not okay. This is what I'm talking about in terms of big picture. Like, let's refocus our priorities. What do we need to survive and be happy? We need a job, we need food, we need shelter, we need perhaps family, we need a clean environment. Beyond that, like, yeah, we like all those things, the big screen TV and the fancy cars and all those things, and those are great if we can achieve them, but we should not be achieving those things on the backs of the people that are suffering in this country and in this world. So what I'm, again, proposing is that instead of talking about a minimum wage, let's talk about a maximum wage and help all of us in this country survive to the point that we can actually do so.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to sort of pick up where I left off because I'm very excited about this, and I want to make the point that my great-grandfather used to famously say that he had traveled all over the world and he knew conclusively that the most beautiful spot on the planet was Hamburg Cove. And I can tell you that I feel the same way. I've traveled all over the planet, and literally I've never seen a place that is more beautiful than the place in which we live. And that should make us proud. We have so many amazing things around us, and we're doing a lot of really exciting infrastructure changes. We're putting investment into mass transit. I know the town of Clinton recently had a planning meeting. Westbrook did too. I've attended a lot of those. I think that we can market this area in a way that will pull even more tourism dollars our way. And it's not getting done right now, but I would like to do it from inside the Connecticut State Senate and augment it with everything I have. Think about it, you guys. We should be pulling many more people out of Boston and New York for 4-day weekends, right? Where you could shop at Clinton Crossings, and you could go to the Westbrook outlets, then you could go to the Connecticut River Museum and hop on the Essex steam train and take the ferry across the river to the Gillette's Castle, go to the Gelston House for lunch and catch an opera at the Goodspeed Opera House, walk through downtown Chester and check out the arts. There is so much amazing things that are happening around us, and we should use them to make our economy so much stronger than it is right now. We live in an amazing place. We have amazing, very bright people and very powerful businesses. Let's make sure that together we move forward in a way that makes our kids have to stay here because they love it so much. And there's just opportunities all over the map for them. We can do it. I know that.
Thank you. I'm glad that Mr. Bennett brought up renewable energy and the importance that it has in our community and why we need it so that we can create jobs. I am the co-founder and partner of a renewable energy business called Green Skies. We've created over 240 jobs, union and non-union, for hardworking people here in Connecticut. I'm not just talking about creating jobs, I'm doing it, and I'm putting my money where my mouth is and investing in Connecticut. And I'm proud of that. And it's also important that when we talk about bringing people here into this state, we need to make sure that we also talk about the reasons why people want to get out. And as I said before, when the gasoline tax is 49 cents here, and it costs $20 less to fill up in our neighboring states in Massachusetts, it's hard to get people to come here for 4-day vacations on a long weekend to stay at the Sabre Point Inn or the Water's Edge Resort. And that's why I voted against a budget that increased the gasoline tax to 8.8%, because it hurts our hardworking people and it deters people from coming to Connecticut. And that's why we need people that will move the debate in Hartford to lowering taxes, because yes, we can lower taxes, and that's exactly what politicians should be talking about in debates, because taxes are wearing out our people and it's making it hard to live and work here. That's what we need to be talking about. That's the debate we need to be having in Hartford, not just saying, oh, we're going to have to raise taxes again because we couldn't figure out a way to solve the problem. That's not the leadership we need in the 33rd District.
We are all aware of the rising college costs and the debt load that many young people are asked to take on. However, we also know that public university tuition has risen at a much faster pace than private colleges. First, what would you do to support affordable public university study? And second, how can we help decrease the debt load that many young people incur?
I'm a huge fan of UConn and our state universities. I voted for an investment into UConn so that we can make sure that we train the next generation of engineers, the next greatest engineers to come from Connecticut. I'm a big supporter of our state universities, and I think we need to continue to do that so that the next generation workforce is trained for the jobs and opportunities in Connecticut. One of the things that I've worked on in the legislature in the last session was actually an idea that came from my Talk to Me program. I sent a letter to every constituent in the district and said, talk to me. Tell me an idea that you have that we can work on together in Hartford. And one of the ideas came from a Clinton High School senior who was going to college for his freshman year. And the idea was that we're going to, when you apply to college and when you get in, that tuition that you sign on the dotted line to pay for is the same tuition that for all 4 years, so the college doesn't do a bait and switch and increase tuition costs on you when you're still there, making it hard to buy books, making it hard to go to school, and making it hard to study. So that's one of the bills that I'll continue to work on, and it was the idea of a Clinton High School student, and we're going to continue to work on it in the next legislative session. Thank you.
I think this is a really important question. There's a whole lot of ways to address it. First and foremost, loans. The loans that students are coming out of, first of all, carrying the debt burden that they carry is crazy, and we need to deal with it almost immediately. Let's talk about the difference between the way in which we loan money to students and the way in which we loan money to big banks, right? Not only do we make students pay a higher interest rate than we're making our big banks pay, but on top of that, we treat the big banks when they fail as if they're too big to fail, and then we throw money at them to bail them out. How come a student who comes out with loans from college, who comes up on some tough times in their own life, they're not allowed to default on that loan? They're not allowed to just say, you know what, I'm too big to fail, right? So I want the government to bail me out too. We need to actually make sure that our government keeps in mind first and foremost people, and especially young people. And students should be our #1 priority, because those guys are eventually going to be our job creators, going to be our next workforce, going to be the taxpayers. And so we need to make sure that they are always our biggest priorities. You know, certainly we need to hold the line on cuts to higher education is another good way to make sure that they're carrying less of a debt burden when they walk out the door. Right now, Connecticut actually has cut less funding than a lot of the other states in New England. We're currently the is currently the third most affordable tuition in New England among big universities. And there's a lot of programs that are coming down the pike that are going to make that even more affordable. Senator Cassano worked on what's called a program called delayed acceptance, which means that if you're accepted to UConn, you actually can go to a community college for the first 2 years and do most of your core classes there in a much more affordable manner, and then be able to spend your last 2 years at UConn and walk away with a degree from the University of Connecticut. I think that's one way in which we are moving into the right direction. But we need to make sure that we're doing even more of that. I also think that we don't need to always believe that all of our kids need a bachelor's degree before they can enter the workforce. There's also a lot of exciting and innovative programs, such as the one at Asnuntuck Community College, where they are making sure that they're churning out manufacturers. They're working with the unions. on apprenticeships. They're working with the technical schools, so the kids who are graduating from those technical high schools are already halfway through their apprenticeship program. Those kinds of things really augment the workforce that we're going to be looking at in the next 10 years, and I think we need to do even more of it.
Thank you, Emily. Colin?
So I already mentioned that we spend more money in this country on higher education through federal funding, through the different loan programs we have, through work study, through administration costs for these programs than it would cost to provide tuition for every student currently in college. Why aren't we doing that? Why are we talking about loan rates? Why aren't we making college education a priority? I agree that not everybody needs to go to college. I don't even think everybody should. But I think that those who want to and those who qualify should absolutely 100% get to go for free. I mean, if we're talking about succeeding in the world, in a global marketplace, if you will, then that should be a priority. In Connecticut, like I already said earlier, we're throwing money, we're flushing money down the toilet through nonviolent offenders in prison. That money that we've already discussed could be put toward either reducing or forgiving loan debt in this state, or making college tuition much more affordable. Even the Department of Corrections itself says that non-incarceration programs, similar programs like halfway houses and things like that outside of prisons, cost less than half of what it does to keep people in prison. So instead of having 1 in 8 of our state employees working in prisons, like, sometimes you just have to pause and let the absurdity of things like that sink in. It hasn't sunk in. I'm never going to get over that. But the point is that we need to prioritize things that need to be prioritized. I know that this is a state senate race and we're talking about Connecticut, but everything's connected. We're throwing trillions of dollars away on wars when we're spending $1 million a piece on a so-called Tomahawk missile. Like, that literally doesn't make sense at all. Like, we just need to reprioritize where we're spending our money, spend our money where we need to be spending it, because there's more than enough money out there. If CEOs can be making hundreds of millions of dollars a year, then we can afford to put our young people through school for free.
Thank you, Colin. Anyone, if no one wants to rebut, then we can move on to the next question. Okay, our next question will go to Emil Bjornberg.
Connecticut has higher prices on certain commodities than neighboring states. In fact, Connecticut is said to be one of the more expensive states in the nation in which to live. Do you support legislation to help lower these prices? And if so, how would you offset any lost revenue that would result?
I've heard, I've actually seen all the signs. I don't know if you guys have seen all the signs that are popping up around the district that say, Connecticut, worst state in the nation to live in, let's fix it this time. Connecticut, highest gas tax in the nation, let's fix it this time. And I worry a lot about the language that we're using to frame this election in general. I have worked all over the planet with a lot of different kinds of leaders, and I can tell you right now that it should be a giant red flag to you if a leader is trying to make you scared. Because human beings almost never make good decisions when they are afraid. And so I think we have to make sure that we are framing those kinds of things in a way that is not only accurate, but it's also constructive. And I worry that the conversation at this point has got, especially at the top of the ticket, guys, that the conversation has gotten so much into mudslinging back and forth that we're no longer actually working on the priorities. Yes, I think the cost of living is too high. Yes, I recognize that the price of certain commodities are too high. I actually think that we, all of us, and it's true the nation over, have come through a really tough economic time. And I think that young people in particular are really worried, and they should be, about making sure that we get ourselves on really sustainable footing. I think that we are beginning to see us come over the hump now and go in the right direction. But we need to continue the kinds of progress that we're making. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's one problem among many that we're going to have to deal with. But we have to make sure that we're doing it in a way that is responsible and sustainable for the next generation.
Thank you. Colin?
So, as my conservative opponent likes to say sometimes, we've had the largest tax increase in Connecticut during this past, or current administration. Governor Lloyd pushed through a $1.8 billion tax increase, which is just nuts. The thing is, if Connecticut's a great state, and we have great in so many different ways, according to a recent New York Times study, you know, Connecticut is the only state in the country that by 6 different factors is doing better than any other state. However, you know, Emily, you said that like we're coming through this recession. That may be true for some folks, but like nationwide, we still have 40 million people without health insurance, and that's with Obamacare. Like, yeah, some people are seeing the other side, but so many people haven't, and those are the folks that are working, you know, 2, 3, sometimes 4 minimum wage jobs just to make ends meet, because it is expensive to live here. You know, Art likes to say, talk about the gas taxes in the other states, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts being a little bit lower. Sometimes I tease and be like, if you like it there so much, why don't you just live there? Yeah, it just was a tease. But the point is that Connecticut is a great state, and it is expensive to live in. It doesn't have to be as expensive as it is. We can have common sense tax policies, and in case it's not like abundantly obvious at this point, I don't pander. And I doubt there's any millionaires in this room, but just in case there are, I'm coming for you, 100%. Because I think that the most wealthy among us need to pay more. The rich among us, the people that can most afford it, need to share the burden, a little bit more of the burden, to help those among us that need help the most. So yes, we need to lower and stabilize taxes for the low, the poor, and middle class, but we also need to think about common sense policies where we're going to have the people, again, making the most money share a little bit more of the burden.
Thank you. Now move on to Art.
Well, 4 years ago, we had the largest tax increase in our state history. We've seen the taxes go up on the middle class like we've never seen it before, and never seen it before in any state across the country. The sales tax, 6.35%, is higher than our neighboring states. That's a tax that raises the cost of goods. It raises the cost of purchasing anything in the state. Also, the gasoline tax went to 45 cents a gallon compared to Massachusetts, which is 23 cents a gallon, or New Jersey, which is 14 cents a gallon. I love Connecticut. That's why I work tirelessly as your state senator to make sure that it's affordable to live here. I'm not going to move anywhere else. I'm not going to move to New Jersey or Massachusetts, but making sure that we lower the sales tax is part of your job as a state senator, because it is too expensive to live here. And that's what I'll do to make sure we bring down the cost, because as we increase taxes, the cost of living, the cost of goods and services goes up, and it moves jobs out of the state. Let's lower the taxes and bring the jobs back. Thank you.
Thank you, Art. If no one would like to move up, we can move on to the next question.
I just, as we continually talk about taxes, I do need to make the point that the only person who is standing up, and I think this will probably surprise most of you, that the only person who's standing on the stage tonight who has put in a proposal that would raise taxes is Art Linares. And the reason that I say that is because the Republican budget that they put forward this year was going to end the earned income tax credit. And Art had already advocated for that another time. The earned income tax credit, for those who are not familiar with it, gives money back to the working poor. And I put the emphasis on working, because sometimes it's misunderstood for people who think that we're just throwing money at people people who are on welfare. That's actually not true. And this policy was one that was advocated for none other than Ronald Reagan. He thought it was a good idea to reward the poor for working. And it recognizes the fact that even the working poor who don't pay income tax still pay a lot of other taxes. In fact, they pay a higher percentage of their income in regressive taxes like sales tax and gas tax. Think about that for a second. If you are a poor person, you are putting a much higher percentage of your income into your gas tank every day and every week. So the Earned Income Tax Credit recognizes that and gives you some of that money back. But the Republican budget, when they talk about making responsible fiscal decisions, they're talking about closing budget gaps on the backs of the people who are most vulnerable in our whole society. And I do think that that's problematic. I think that we do want to encourage poor people for working, and I do want to make sure that the fiscal policies that we're putting forward are not going to put seniors on fixed incomes at risk, and they're not going to put children at risk. They're not going to put our education system at risk. We're going to make sure that we stand together through the recession.
I actually don't want to, but Art, I'll cede my time to you if you have anything to say in response.
Thank you, Colin. And I'm glad that the Earned Income Tax Credit was brought up tonight because it's an important issue. The other day I was making a phone call to a constituent in the town of Clinton who said to me, you know, Art, I feel like every time we try and send $1 to someone that needs it most, by the time it goes through the bureaucracy in Hartford, only 50 cents of that dollar gets to them to help the people that need it. And yes, Ronald Reagan came up with the idea to support the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is giving direct cash directly to people who need it the most. Not building a large bureaucracy with hundreds of state jobs and paying everyone and making sure that that money gets directly to the people that need it most, rather than building a massive bureaucracy and building more people that depend on welfare in this state. And the problem is that in Connecticut, we have a very large welfare system and bureaucracy already. And so the point of the Earned Income Tax Credit is to give the money directly to the people. And what we're finding is people that use the Earned Income Tax Credit aren't paying taxes. It's a tax credit for people who don't pay taxes. We need to get control of this program. We're seeing a lot of issues with the Earned Income Tax Credit. And you know what? My opponent stood up here and said that be aware of somebody that tries to use fear to get you to vote. That's exactly what she's doing. And you know what we did that we tried to reform the Earned Income Tax Credit for? Was to lower the gasoline tax. I'm the only one up here with a solution to lower taxes. So until you have one, I would advise you to start thinking about it, because the people of this district deserve to sit there.
Thank you. I believe we will now be moving on to closing statements, and we'll be starting with Colin Bennett.
So first of all, I apologize for that. I did that to prove a point. Again, just like I said earlier, back and forth. Both of my candidates on this side represent the status quo. Regardless of who's in office in Hartford, whether it had been the Democrats or the Republicans, you know, we have years and years of Republican governors saying, going back to Wyckoff, no income tax. Where do we get an income tax? That income tax goes up. The point is, it just goes back and forth while all of us, or the vast majority of us, are suffering. We're like, it's a house of cards where it's like, oh, please don't follow us on us. And like Emily said, at the top level, we have these two, there's actually 3 candidates in the race, but the 2 that apparently are on TV ad nauseum, just over and over again, like, what are they really saying? It's like, I'll do a better job, he'll do an awful job, or he'll do an awful job, and I might not do as bad of a job. The point is, I fundamentally, is anybody honestly familiar with the saying, of the people, by the people, for the people? When was the last time you could look at an elected official, look at an agency of our government and truly think that that agency or that part of government, whether it be the legislative branch or the executive branch, was truly acting as of the people, by the people, and for the people? Silence. I mean, literally, I am a constituent too. I'm a voter, and I can't point to any part of our government that's functioning well. Like, it's just constant partisan bickering at the state level, at the federal level. Congress has a 90, it's lowest approval rating in a really long time. So the point is that this is why I'm up here. I'm presenting another choice to you. I'm not going to pander. You don't have to agree with anything or everything I say, but you do have to recognize one thing, regardless of your political beliefs, that I am up here to represent the people. I'm not up here representing partisan politics. I'm not up here representing special interests, and I'm not up here representing corporations. I'm 100% of the people, by the people, for the people. I'm spending so far on this campaign about $100. I don't know yet, the numbers haven't come out, what these candidates are spending, but I know it's in the tens of thousands of dollars. That's not what democracy is, spending a ton of money to get elected. One more thing I want to say is that, Emily, a couple of your supporters have asked me to drop out of the race, and so I'm addressing that specifically. Apparently they think that if people vote for me, that it's going to take away votes for her and put Art in office. The thing is, I would rather see Emily in office than Art, just quite frankly. But dropping out of the race, asking me to drop out of the race is antithetical, 100% antithetical to democracy. It literally means that you care more about partisan politics than you do the very foundation that our country is supposed to be founded on. I've literally considered dropping out, again, because I'd rather see Emily, but because so many people have asked me to, that's not happening.
Thank you all very much. You've been a wonderful audience. I think, can we just give a quick round of applause to the political club? I want to say that I come from a family of Republicans. And when Art was elected 2 years ago, I remember them using words. They were excited. They thought he'd be innovative. That they actually used the word moderate. And I know moderate Republicans. I'm related to a lot of them, and so I can say with conviction, Art Linares, you are no moderate. In 2 years, you have voted against every dollar of education funding that's come in here. You voted against minimum wage increases twice. You voted against 3 bans that would have kept toxic chemicals away from our children. You've aligned yourself with right-wing organizations like CPAC and the Family Institute. You've racked up the 2nd worst environmental record in the entire Connecticut State Senate. You twice put in legislation that would end the earned income tax credit. And you stand up here pretending that you stand for small government when your company takes in tens of millions of dollars in government subsidy money. Tens of millions of dollars. That's not the advocate for lower taxes and smaller government. I think that voters have a clear choice in this election. We need a stronger voice for our small towns. We deserve someone who prioritizes us first, not industry first, not lining his pockets first. We need somebody who wants to protect our children and preserve our environment and invest in our communities and employ our veterans and get the economy growing in a way that is sustainable for all of us, not just a few of us, by augmenting support for the true drivers of our economic climate. I ask for your vote on November 4th because I know that we actually deserve, and I know this in my core, that we deserve leadership that puts the best interests of our small towns and our businesses and our children and our seniors above all else. So thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you in the next 2 weeks on the campaign.
you. I'd like to thank the Clinton High School students for hosting this event. Thank you, and best of luck for the rest of your school year. Now, as you saw tonight, my opponent, out of desperation and void of solutions, has begun a smear campaign against me when it comes to women and children and the environment. Well, let me read to you some legislation that I've acted on and voted on for the last 2 sessions to support women and children and the environment. An act concerning toxic fire retardants in children's clothing. An act concerning cross-reporting of child abuse. An act concerning youth athletics and concussions. An act concerning sexual assault. An act concerning criminal background checks. I voted for the preserve. I voted to ban fracking waste. I voted for a clean water plan. An act concerning genetically engineered food. An act concerning mental health of our youth. And on June 13th, 2013, I received a call from a constituent to thank me for voting on the GMO labeling bill and pushing it through the Senate and standing up for children and families. And that person was my opponent. By the way, Emily, you're welcome. Yes! I believe that ideas and hard work create solutions to difficult problems for the people you represent, because helping people is what we do. So 2 quick points. First, I promise to work to grow our economy. I promise to all of you that I will continue to oppose tax increases that hurt hardworking people and seniors in this state. And second, I want the students to know, the ones that live here, the students here tonight, that your family does not need to come over to America on the Mayflower. Your family does not need to live here for 10 generations. You do not need to inherit a business to be successful and to run for office in Connecticut. You can have your own ideas, work hard, and achieve your dreams by working hard and making sure you play by the rules. That's why America is the greatest country on earth. And on November 4th, I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.